Every year, hundreds of thousands of immigrants arrive in France. Not over decades, not over generations. Every year. Do the math. In the suburbs of Paris, Marseille, or Lyon, reception centers are overwhelmed. Schools change. Neighborhoods change. Presidents come and go, promising the same thing: integration, control, balance. They promise that France will remain France. Years later, official figures are manipulated and headlines move on. But in the streets, the story is different. The country's identity has been completely blurred. Nothing is the same anymore. Because when a demographic change happens this fast, it doesn't usually stop. It becomes normal. Today we're going to look at how many immigrants are really living in France, what percentage of newborns already come from immigrant families, and how this change could bring France to an end. Let's start with the basics, with the raw data that nobody can deny. More than 8 million immigrants live in France today. That's equivalent to 12% of the total population, an entire country within a country. And be careful here, because this number only counts immigrants, not the new French citizens. In other words, if we add all the foreign people who already have French citizenship to this number, the figure would increase dramatically. From my perspective, it would reach half or even more of the population. It's absolutely insane. But let me give you something even more concrete. In the Île-de-France region, where Paris and its surroundings are located, immigrants already make up more than 40% of the population. That means 4 out of every 10 people. And here's the crazy part. In some neighborhoods, that average falls short because the totality of residents are immigrants. There are entire zones where native French people are a minority or even completely absent in their own land. So the question we must ask ourselves is this: who does France belong to today? Does it belong to the lifelong European French, or to those who arrived just a few years ago and invaded the country? This isn't rhetoric. This is a legitimate question that millions of French citizens are asking themselves every single day. Now, let me share something that will truly blow your mind. The situation in maternity wards tells an even more alarming story. 35% of newborns in France have at least one immigrant parent. Read that again. More than 1 out of every 3 babies born in France doesn't come from a traditional French family. And we need to add to this the speed at which this is happening. Immigrant families are reproducing at young ages with multiple children, something that Europeans stopped doing several decades ago. And we're not talking about Italians or Spaniards like in previous eras. The vast majority come from Africa, from places that don't have a European appearance, don't speak the language, have different customs, practice a different religion, and worst of all, they don't want to adapt. On the contrary, they want to forcefully impose their own customs. This makes me wonder, if they're so proud of their lands and love their customs so much, why don't they get back on the same boat that brought them to Europe and return to their beloved homeland? We're not just talking about statistics here. We're talking about a change of skin, a change of face, a change of soul. The France we knew, with its language, its order, its proudly European culture, has been replaced by something completely different. If you don't believe me, just look at the national football team. A few years ago, it was composed entirely of Europeans with maybe 1 or 2 Africans or Caribbean players. But today, the entire French team is of African origin. In fact, many of us think France should participate in the African Cup instead of the European Championship. The only thing left of European France is its geographical location. Obviously, this channel expects the person watching to have at least a bit of common sense to understand what I'm saying. Don't come to me with nonsense about how, just because someone was born in a territory, they should be considered European or French. It's like a teacher saying if you don't know how to add or subtract, go back to 1st grade. We're already in 3rd or 4th grade now. At this point, I shouldn't have to explain these basic concepts to you. If you want a more detailed explanation about this, check out my channel, where I've dedicated several videos to this topic for those who haven't studied this subject. Meanwhile, the typical French person, the native, the one who pays taxes, which by the way are extremely high, taxes that are being used to support all these immigrants, many of them illegal, who are invading their country. These pure-blooded French citizens are feeling like foreigners in their own land. And this isn't something I'm saying based.
We haven't even talked yet about what this means in daily life, in schools, in hospitals, in neighborhoods, in the very language you hear on the streets. Because if the numbers alone are already alarming, what people experience every day on the streets is chaos that continues to grow without stopping. That's where the real conflict begins. France is experiencing such a massive cultural clash that many feel it on their skin every single day. And although politicians and international organizations try to cover it up, this is extremely serious. It's not just that there are more immigrants, it's how the daily life of millions of French people has changed in barely one generation. And when I say clash, I mean that customs, religion, language, appearance, and even the way people relate to each other have become different from what France historically was. A country that for centuries had a clear, proud identity based on liberty, equality, and fraternity is now in total crisis. The immigrants who arrive don't want to integrate. They don't feel French. They don't learn the language as they should. They don't adopt French customs, and in many cases, they end up replicating the same social dynamics they had in their country of origin. The result is evident. More than 80% of native French people believe that integration has failed. And the other 20%? They're immigrants who have French citizenship. What's happening in France today is deeply concerning, and if you want a concrete example of this clash, you don't have to look far. Look at the schools. For decades, the French educational system was one of the pillars of its national identity. Today, that system is in crisis in areas where immigrants are the majority. It's not just about language, it's also about belonging. Children who don't recognize French history as their own, who don't identify with national symbols. The consequence is a vicious circle. The grandparents didn't integrate, the parents didn't integrate, and the grandchildren won't integrate either, with resentment growing parallel to the rejection from locals, the few who remain. So what do we have? A divided society where French people feel they're losing ground in their own country, and in the middle, a state that continues preaching multiculturalism as if it were a magic recipe, while ordinary people live with the cost of that recipe every single day. When we talk about insecurity in France, there's something nobody can continue denying. Crime is growing, and the numbers show it in a brutal way. Let's look at Paris statistics, for example, where 48% of crimes were committed by immigrants. That means almost half. But as we always say, that 48% refers to those who have foreign citizenship. The remaining 52% of crimes weren't committed by locals, by Europeans. They were also committed by immigrants, but immigrants who have European citizenship, who have local citizenship. The official discourse tries to soften it. They tell you there's no direct causal relationship between immigration and criminality, that everything is actually explained by factors like poverty or marginalization, that if you live in segregated neighborhoods with fewer opportunities, you're more likely to end up in trouble. But we know very well that these aren't isolated cases. This is a dynamic that repeats itself over and over again in different countries. The pattern is crystal clear, and when that happens, crime isn't just a statistic. It becomes a consequence of what you imported. The right-wing movement is growing quite strong in France with Marine Le Pen, as well as with Eric Zemmour, who is even more extremist. In fact, they almost won recently. And here it's necessary to make a clarification. As I've told you in several videos after I woke up, don't forget that right and left don't exist. They're both sides entirely governed and manipulated by the same people. Therefore, don't fall into the absurd discussion of saying, Marine Le Pen must govern, it's the only way for France to rise, or that the AfD should govern in Germany, for example. It's exactly the same. Now let's talk about something that affects every single French citizen directly in their wallet: the economic impact of mass immigration. France has one of the most generous welfare systems in the world. Healthcare, education, housing assistance, unemployment benefits,
all available to residents, including immigrants. The problem is that the system wasn't designed to support millions of new arrivals, many of whom don't contribute but heavily use its resources. Let me break down the numbers. While unemployment for native French hovers around 7 to 8%, for immigrants from North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, it's nearly double, reaching 15 to 20%. This means a large portion depends on state benefits rather than contributing through taxes. Housing assistance alone costs billions annually. Healthcare is under enormous strain. Prisons are overcrowded, with up to 70% of prisoners being Muslim, many immigrants or children of immigrants. Some argue immigrants contribute through labor in construction, hospitality, and agriculture. But many work in the informal economy, paying no taxes. Others work low-wage jobs where tax contributions are minimal compared to benefits received. The net fiscal impact is negative. France spends far more on immigrants than it receives back. Tourism is also suffering. Visitors expect the Eiffel Tower and charming cafes, not tent cities and unsafe areas. The most frustrating part? Ordinary French citizens pay for all this. France has some of the highest tax rates in Europe. Income taxes, social security, property taxes, VAT, all pile up, creating an enormous burden. And where does that money go? Supporting a failed immigration policy. The average French worker sees their hard-earned money given to people who arrived recently, don't speak the language, don't share the culture, and often reject French values. This creates massive resentment. People feel they work hard just to support others who contribute nothing. Economic anxiety drives the rise of right-wing movements. People are tired of paying more and getting less, of seeing neighborhoods decline, of feeling unsafe. The economic reality is clear. Mass immigration is an economic disaster, draining resources and lowering quality of life. The system is unsustainable. How long can this continue before everything collapses? So where does this lead? What's the future of France? Based on current trends, the outlook is bleak. If nothing changes, France as we know it will cease to exist within a generation. Native French have around 1.8 children per woman, below replacement rate. Immigrant families have 3, 4, 5 or more. Simple mathematics. Within 20 or 30 years, native French could become a minority in their own country. This isn't speculation. We see it in major cities: Paris, Marseille, Lyon. The transformation is already advanced, and it's spreading beyond urban areas to small towns and rural regions. Immigration is reaching every corner of the country. What will France look like in 2050? A country where French isn't the dominant language in many areas, where Islamic culture is the norm, where European architecture stands as a monument to a civilization that no longer exists. This might sound dramatic, but look at the transformation in just 30 or 40 years. If the rate continues or accelerates, my description of 2050 France might be conservative. The cultural, religious, and ethnic composition is changing at unprecedented pace. No society has undergone such rapid transformation without massive conflict, and that's what worries me most: the potential for conflict. You cannot have two completely different populations with incompatible values in the same space without tension. History shows multiculturalism doesn't work when cultures are too different. It leads to division, resentment, violence. We're seeing early stages in France now: the riots, the crime, the no-go zones. These are warnings. The transformation is real, happening now, and unless something dramatic changes, it's irreversible. The question every French person must ask: what country do you want your children to inherit? The France of culture, history, and beauty your ancestors built, or a completely different country in the same geographical space? Those are the choices. No middle ground. The France of tomorrow will either be French or it won't. Right now, it's heading toward the latter. How long can this be sustained? Because it's not just insecurity. It's cultural change, loss of confidence, breakdown of social order. France is paying the price for opening the cage to people with no interest in becoming French, who reject the values and traditions of the country that welcomed them. This price is measured in fear, in the feeling you can't walk peacefully down the street, that your neighborhood changed, that your country is no longer the same. When people lose confidence in their security, they lose confidence in their future. France has been losing its identity and culture for years, culture that was a source of national pride. I truly wonder, how long will we continue considering France a European country? This isn't hate speech. This is love. Love for one's own, for what ancestors built, for the identity of each nation. Just as I say this about France, I could say it about Japan, Argentina, any country. This is a call to defend the identity of each country. France has one of the most incredible histories in the world. Its culture, architecture, gastronomy, people. That's why this battle is so important. The time has come to speak clearly, to stop fearing labels and accusations, to say, we want our countries back. Not because we hate others, but because we love our own. There's nothing wrong with preserving your culture, identity, way of life. It's the most natural thing in the world. Every people throughout history fought to preserve their homeland. Why should Europeans be different? I ask you to share this video with your contacts, groups, everyone who might appreciate this information. Truth needs to spread. People need to wake up before it's too late. Before I go, subscribe so you don't miss the next videos on this topic and other countries facing similar situations. The fight for our identities, cultures, nations is global. What's happening in France is happening across the Western world. The future of France and Europe hangs in balance. The decisions we make today determine what world our children inherit. Will they grow up in societies honoring their ancestors, or become strangers in their own lands? The choice is ours, but time is running out. Every day without action makes reversal more difficult. Demographic changes are real. Cultural transformation is real. Replacement is real. It won't stop until we find courage to say enough. Enough with lies, guilt, destruction of what our ancestors built. France deserves better. Europe deserves better. Our children deserve better. They deserve to inherit countries still their own, cultures still alive, identities not erased. That's what we're fighting for. Thank you for watching, for caring, for seeing the truth even when uncomfortable. Until next time, subscribe.